Okay, good morning to everybody. And I'm sorry I'm so late. This class is supposed to start at 10:30. But for reasons that are reasons, right? The reasons don't change the Matthias. It's 11:30 and here I am. I'm teaching today with Hashem's help the second part of the Maimed Shuva Yisrael. And I'm going to go with the presumption that you're not showing up to this class without having heard at least some of the classes before. And I'll give you I'll bring you up to speed. Nukuda number one is that this is part of the shurim that we do for Beis Medrash Shanash Mabone 770. And we have a regular Seder that's been going now for 11 years, Berech, with Hashem's help, where we learned the Maimorim of the Rebbe, our Rebbe. Backwards. We started with Nun Aleph and Mem Tes and Mem Ches and Mem Zayin and Mem Vav, and now we're doing Lamed Ches. Mitzvah Hashem, around this coming Yutes Kislev, Abba Aleinu L'Teva, Yutes Kislev Tavshin Pei Aleph, we will complete all the Maimorim of Lamed Ches. We've learned almost all of them. And we'll start Lamed Zayin. Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach V'Yasala. That's the plan. So we're learning the Maimorim of Tishrei, Lamed Ches. And as I explained it to you, the first three Maimorim of Tishrei, that means Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos, Shuva, which was Vayelech, and Ha'azinu are a Hemshech. What is the nature of the Hemshech? The nature of the Hemshech is that the Rebbe makes a certain presumption. And on the basis of this presumption, he asks a question. The presumption is that when it comes Rosh Hashanah, when it comes Aseret Yom Tshuva, when it comes Yom Kippur, and it comes the Dalad Yom B'Yom Kippurim L'Sukkos, all Yidden are in the highest madregas. First of all, some Yidden are tzaddikim. Second of all, every Yid is a cheskes kashrus, so all Yidden have Amichom tzaddikim. And third of all, it's the season. It's after Elul and the Chai Yomim, the Yid Beis Yomim between Chayel and Rosh Hashanah and Yemei Aslichas and Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Yom Tshuva and Yom Kippurim. So the questions become, if a Yidden are at such a high level, why is the temperament and the mood and the spirit and the instruction symptomatic of Yidden being on a very low level? So in the Maimed of Min HaMeitzah, the question was straight up. Min HaMeitzah means a Yid cries from the depths. Why does he cry from the depths? Because he's in a deep hole. So the Rebbe said, a Yid's not in a deep hole, he's in a high level. And of course the Rebbe answered that even on the highest of levels, there's still a Min HaMeitzah. Because no matter how high one is, compared to what's above, there's a Min HaMeitzah. Then the Rebbe added Nachakvetch, which has been very meaningful to me. The mashal of the mother who hears the pain of the daughter, meaning to say that when you're in the highest levels, you know that the deficiencies on the lowest levels are a symptom of the small deficiencies on the highest levels, and therefore you can scream like the daughter screams. The next two Maimorim, Shuva Yisrael and Ha'azinu, they go in the same approach, but there's a different tool that the Rebbe employs to make his point. He doesn't use the mashal of the Ima, that Shoimas, Tzarkas Bito. Instead, he uses the Siddur and the Chsidis from Likutei Torah. There's a concept in Likutei Torah which says that we daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem should evoke mercies on us. And the Alter Rebbe asks the question. And by the way, if you learn Tanya, you learn against Shuva, Pedig Zayin, and also in the Chelik Rishon of Tanya, you have it in a number of places. Pedig, Chav Ches, and then Mem Hey. That there's an idea of being Ma'ir Rachem Ram Al Ma'atzmai. A person should arouse mercies upon himself, and arousing mercies upon oneself is helpful in Tshuva. So the question becomes, why does the Yid have to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you be Ma'ir Rachem for me, a person Ma'ir Rachem for himself? So the Rebbe answers that sometimes the person doesn't know how big a Rachmanis it is on himself. So he says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I don't even know the great Rachmanis on myself, so I plead to you that you should be Me'edir Rachman for me. Now in Likutei Torah, in other places, this vort of B'rachamecha Rabim Rachem Aleinu, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be Me'edir Rachman for us, because we don't have Rachmanis on ourselves, is explained legreyese, in negative, that because we're in such a low maimed matzav, like it says in the Hayem of Chof Elu, der was ist niedrig und grob, fehlt nicht seine eigene Niedrigkeit und seine eigene Grobkeit. Somebody who's crude and coarse and low doesn't have a sensitivity to how low he is. So you don't have Rahmanas on yourself because I don't have Rahmanas on myself. A person does not have Rahmanas on himself because he's numb. That's how it's explained. If you say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I have no Rahmanas on me, you be made a Rahman on me. And of course it's consistent with the idea that it says in Torah, Sheita also l'rachim olav. You don't have Rahmanas on a Sheita. Why? Because he's a ma'abed masha neisnim le. He has no Rahmanas on himself. So you have the word from the Rebbe Rashab. Imagine how big a Rahmanas it is on a person when Torah says you're not allowed to have a Rahmanas on him. And it's a similar idea here. You're saying to the Eibishter, my spiritual condition does not allow me to have Rahmanas on me. You have Rahmanas on me. But this Maimed takes that Lakuta Torah and spins it different. That what is the reason? We say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, have Rahmanas on me with your compassion. Because, quote, I don't have sufficient Rahmanas on myself. So he explains because you're on a very high level. When a person's on a high level, they can't be made the same intensity, the same min hametzar, to use the language of the earlier Maimed, as someone who is Rahman al-Itzlan and Shel Tachtis. So when a person is on high levels, and in spite of the fact they're on high levels, perfect, they're not perfect, no one is, so there needs to be Rachamim. So we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'rachamecha rabim rachem aleinu, because considering how edel the Averis are, considering how fine the madregas of tshuva being discussed are, a person doesn't have it within himself to appreciate how serious that is and to be upset with himself and have rachmim on himself. So you say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'rachamecha rabim rachem aleinu. That's the consistency in the Maimorim. If the Rebbe goes into Tishrei with an assumption that all Yidden are in the highest levels, nevertheless there's a min hametzad, nevertheless there's an inyan from tshuva, and of course in the next Maimed, nevertheless there's an inyan of Kanesha Yor Kini, the Shem Boda Janchenu Bein Imekel Necher, in the Lashon Harav, O Kafi Sheyes Ba'elakam. So yesterday we learned the first half of this Maimed. And of course, typical us, we didn't learn it in order. I introduced the Maimed with this Vort, because I wanted to emphasize what I believe is the heart of the Maimed, just like I did in the Shurim that I gave him in Ametzah. And then we went back to the beginning of the Maimed and we asked all the classic questions. Why does it say Shuva Yisrael Ad? First of all, why Ayid has to do Shuva and Yom Neroim on a high level? Second of all, why does it say the word Ad? It should say La. Second of all, why does it say both Havaya and Elekecha? And then Ki Choshalta Ba'avinecha, because the person has stumbled with sin, which Yid as a Shaykhas Ta'avera, Yidden are in the highest levels, as the Rebbe explained it in the Maimed. So, in order to answer these questions, he brought the Tzemach Tzedek, who's basing on the Maimed of the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe mentioned that when the Tzemach Tzedek quoted this of the Alter Rebbe, he actually said when the Alter Rebbe said it, what year. And there's three translations in Shuva Yisrael Ad. But the three are in two directions. Two of them are going up and one is bringing down. The first pshat in Shuva Yisrael Ad Havaya Lekecha is that Havaya should become Lekecha because Havaya is included in Atzmos. When Havaya is included in Atzmos, it's relative to Atzmos like Elikim. The second teretz is Shuva Yisrael Ad. Ad is Malchus, because Malchus is connected to time, but above time, as he explained it. So that Malchus also has an Aliyah. So the first two pshatim of Shuva Yisrael Ad Havaya Lekecha is that through the Avodah of Tshuva that we cause number one, Zoh, Ein Seif, Havaya, to be included in Atzmos, Tshuva to go up. And number two, that even Malchus, that's the Makar Asman, also is included in Atzmos, also going up. Then we have the third pshat in Shuva Yisrael Ad Havaya Lekecha, that you bring Ein Seif down. And as the Rebbe said, even though Mamal Kalalman is a good guy, he's a good tezach, he's a Gili Alakus, and Seif of Kalalman is a Gili Alakus, it's not enough until Shuva Yisrael Ad Havaya Lekecha you reveal Seif of Kalalman and Mamal Kalalman. So the Rebbe brought these three interpretations of the pasuk Shuva Yisrael Ad, and he made the point of saying that from this you see that the pshat and the pasuk Shuva Yisrael Ada L'Shem Elokecha, even though it says Ki Chashalta Ba'avinecha, is not talking about a simple yid, a low yid with low gross averis, but a fine edel yid with holy and lofty averis, because we're explaining the Ada V'Elokecha and the edelste ways. As you'll see soon, the Rebbe is going to explain on the top of page Chaf. We're holding on your test right now, but on top of page Chaf, the PDF is on the Facebook page. I put it up yesterday. You can find it very easily, and you can learn with us inside. That the Ki Chashalta Ba'avinecha that says here, that the reason the person has to do tshuva is because of avonos. It doesn't mean avonos, but pashtus, it means avonos mloshen iva zeikom and the edelste madreges, because that's the spirit of this maimer. In short, we're learning a maimer Chasidus about tshuva that assumes that every yid is in an incredibly high level, and the question then becomes, if every yid is in such a high level, why does he baklal have to do tshuva? And the answer is because it could be on an even higher level, and because of the edelkeit of the deficiency, you have to say, a person cannot be made rachem rabim on himself because he doesn't see his situation as, quote, bad enough, end quote. And the yid has to do tshuva with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ada V'Elokech, with the various different interpretations, the loftier interpretations of how we understand the words Ada Shem Elokech. So we continue, Pei Gimel inside, which is number 6 if you have the PDF. In the page of test, it's the Maimer of Shuva Yisrael for Shabbos Pashas Vayelech Tov Shin Lamed Ches, which is printed in Sefer Memorim Tov Shin Lamed Ches, which came out from Hanochas Balahak. They now call themselves Teres Menachem. On the top of page of test. V'hine, Api Pirush Hanal, based on the earlier interpretation. Move when we now understand. Sha'in in the Shuva Yisrael, that when it says in the pasuk that a yid should do tshuva, it doesn't just mean a sinner in the basic sense, but Shaya Gametel Tzadikim is talking even about Tzadikim. Because we're talking about a need for tshuva because of chesrenes and the highest levels. You know how high that a person cannot see about himself, how great that Achmanis it is. He needs the Eibusha to do it on his behalf. Never will, which is the Madrega of Benyan. Especially tzaddikim, and then the Rebbe goes on to speak right away. Tzaddik Gomor, the Rebbe is talking about Tzaddik Gomor as if it's everybody in the street. Is Madrega now that is an incredibly high level. Shani Kira Gomor, the Rebbe translates in Yiddish. Geendigt, that he's done, he's graduated, his avodah in terms of bidur of himself is complete, and now his avodah is liachta kuchabrichu shchentei betachtenim sheishem shemayim esayv al yodacha lefi shvar gomer avodah. He finished all of the work on self-refinement. Ve'eini shayach l'nyan ability to tzom kim for betanya, has no relation with negative things. Says the Rebbe Negama Madreges Tzaddik Gomer, even such a Tzaddik Gomer tzadich liyas etzli ha'avodah. The Shuva Yisrael Ada Shem Elokech, even such a person has to do tshuva. Why? I know the reason is because in Yana Tshuva, who the idea of tshuva is lahales es atzmei oif hoibin zich. Tshuva doesn't only mean going away from bad; it means to go to good, and going away from bad has a limit, but going to good doesn't have a limit. And the idea is elhas kol abri and kol seidirish talshus, when a yid does tshuva and he raises himself, he raises up the whole creation, and he raises up all of his talshalos. Because it says in the Pasagama, Selam Nasam Beliba. And when he raises himself, he raises the entire world, and he raises all of the worlds. I skipped a few lines, beginning of the line of Madrege Shedum Masinyan Atzur, until you reach a level which is called Tzur, Tzadik Vav Reish, which means rock. But it says, of course, in Mir Nevuchim, it's brought in Chasidus, that Tzur means Maker Machzev, the sword from which stones are carved out, are quarried out. And then the Nimshal Tzur means the Eibishter, which is the source of everything. As it's explained in many places in Chasidus. Not only is Ein Seif becoming included in Tzur, but even Malchus, which is the source of the world, which is a substantially godly level, but not as high a godly level as Havaya, is also to Salul Shor Makeda. The worlds have an uplifting, Malchus has an uplifting, and Havaya, Sevav Kalaman, has an uplifting. Why? Because Havaya is Lashon Haya, Hayve, V'yi, Kechol, which is Yidr Azmat. Meaning to say, even though yesterday the Rebbe taught us that Havaya, Sevav Kalaman, is higher than Zman. Memale Kalalman is called Ad because it has a Shaykhis Tisman, even though it's an Inyan Yitzchi, which is the Makkah Tisman. Now we say that even Havaya has a Shaykhis Tisman. Why? Because it's called Hoya Hoiva V'yeh Ke'echad. And when you say that past, present, and future are one, or at least acknowledging that there's a concept of a past and a present and a future. And he goes on to say, and certainly if you say Havaya Lashon Mahav, it's for sure Shaykhis to Elamis. So B'meil the Rebbe says not only is Malchus, which is called Ad, or called Elikim, Shaykhis to Elamis and needs an Aliyah, but even Havaya, which is Ein Safe, and it's higher than time. And especially when it's called Mahava Lashon Creator, all have a Shaykhis Elamis, and they all need an Aliyah. So B'kitzir, the person needs an Aliyah, Tshuva. The worlds need an Aliyah, Tshuva. The Elamis need an Aliyah, Tshuva. Malchus needs an Aliyah, Tshuva, and even Ein Safe needs an Aliyah, Tshuva. I'm now 5 lines from the bottom of page Yutes, like it says in Kabbalah Isa Mishas Chasidim. Who will look at the Teda? That this levels. Havaya Zoh is Ain't Safe, right? But Chazali is Elikim Ba'leisei Elatika. When you compare the Gili of Havaya to the Helam of Havaya or the Etzem of Havaya, and he gives the example of Atek, Shelagabe Yatika Kalechem Yechosh. Even though Havaya is Ain't Safe. And of course, in terms of world and in terms of us, the idea of Ein Safe, and even the idea of a Gili of Ein Safe, is overwhelmingly complete and whole and perfect. It's Dvekis Nelakus, has no Metzias, has no Chesrenes, compared to a Havaya which is higher. And in this case, Atika Gedish is called Olakim. And Shapela Maliyah Dezaba Atik, when you cause Ein Safe, which is the Madrega of Gilui, to be included in the Ein Safe, which is the Madrega of Atik, it's considered a Tshuva, an Aliyah. Because Zoh is Atzilus, it's Ishtalshalos, not to get removed from Ishtalshalos, turn to page Chof. And therefore, when Zoh is Eila Bayatik, it's considered Kelikim Yechashiv. I'm going to be Makatzer of this, and maybe we could be Mayrech, we could be Mazbet. This is the Nakuda that the Rebbe is arguing, that when you understand what the Tzemach Tzedek says, in the name of the Alter Rebbe, about the 3 interpretations of Shuva Yisrael Ada D'Shem Elekacha, you understand that this is true even for the highest people. You know how high? People who are in such a high madrega that they, quote, cannot be me'edei rachem rabim upon themselves because they don't see the Gedel HaChesed. But they have enough seichel to say, B'rachamecha rabim rachem aleinu, the Eibusha should have rachmanas on us and bring us to do tshuva as well. And therefore, the Rebbe continues in Peidik Dalet. On page Chofu Mamshech Bekosov, Ki Chashalta Ba'avinecha, the Pasuk says that the reason for the need for this tshuva, because we've stumbled from Avedes. So the Rebbe said the Tevas, Ki Pirush and Sinas Tam. Ki means a reason. Using the reason that people have stumbled because of sin explains the need for Shuva Yisrael Ada D'Shem Elekacha, that a person has to do tshuva in himself and in the world and in Ishtalshlus and in Malchus and in Ein Seif. Shazel Mishum, the reason is Kashalta Ba'avinecha. You could ask right away a Shaila, if you're talking about a tzaddik and a tzaddik gomer, where's the Kashalta Ba'avinecha? So the Rebbe answers, this of course is classic and basic, this is not hard. The meaning of stumbling from sin doesn't have to mean Rachmana Litzlan, a sin, which are the Shaykhs to Klipa and to Klipas Atmeis. But this Leirak Oven Avedas Kipshuta doesn't have to mean sin in the basic and simple and literal sense. Now, La Pirish, Umelashon Ivas, V'ikum, and the Rebbe says, Niedish Krumkeit. Before we look at the Torah, any kind of entanglement, any kind of complication that's not consistent with simple and straight and fair and good and holy and righteous and light-filled is already an Aveda. One has entangled, crookeded the road. He's in a very high level, but he should be on a higher level yet. And the Rebbe continues, and that's why you have a need for tshuva. Where is this in the person's life? Push it. Being born, yeah, is an Aveda. Maybe it is, but we didn't commit it, right? We have no choice in being born. Shleisha shut from Ba'adam, a father and a mother, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not the Adam. So the fact that we exist neshama beguf is entirely out of our control. We didn't do it at all. But it's a yerida. It's an Aveda. An Aveda not in the sense that we were made b'melech macham HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's an Aveda in the sense of ivas v'ikum, that we descended mi'igre rama l'bira mikdash. Sharei. Hanesham nemshachet miteiches timis barach comes from the of the Eibusha. It says in the past of Yipaf l'shpes Chaim, like it says in Tanya. Umisham yad le'ela b'chulu. V'nim tzayshiri dezu atzma ivas v'ikum. The neshama is coming into this guf as a huge entanglement, complication, and crookedness. Shaneshama ifsa is darka. The neshama has entangled its way. Ve'ena b'makam haroi law is not where she should be. Igraram. And the Rebbe is speaking in a way as if it's the neshama's fault. And of course, maybe you could say the pshat is because, like it says in the Baal Shem Tov, a neshama bankt, neshama vart, 1000 Jahr nach abzukommen auf der Welt, ableben 70, 80 Jahr. So we want it. So it's not our fault. And this is what I tell my students. It's not your fault, but it's your problem. I tell to the parents also. It's not your fault, it's your problem. So the neshama is in this world, whether it's its fault or it's not its fault. The bottom line is there's a situation of, quote, sin, ivas v'yikum, and it needs to be corrected. The reason for this decline is to go back up. And he brings what says in the Pasuk, Neira Alila Bnei Yadam, which could translate, you had no control over what happened to you. Or, even if you did have control over what happened to you, it happened because of the good that's going to come later. It becomes imperative. A person has to lift himself. As it says in the Pasuk, which is brought in Old Mamorim Malukut Teira about Shuva, Varuach Toshuv Alalakim Hashem Nesana, the Neshama has to do Shuva. Not just the Nefesh, but also the Ruach. Until Alakim, which means Helam Ha'atzmi Hashem Nesana, which is the source of the Matana and the Pikadon of Yidus and Neshama Lamata. And it's Lapshas Baguf. So whoever we are, there's no such thing as a human being that doesn't have a need for tshuva. And there's no such thing as a human being whose need for tshuva is so acute, is so fundamental, that it should make them cry, but they don't know it. And that's why you have to say, B'rachamecha Rabim Rachim Aleinu. And the Rebbe continues and repeats again, when a person does tshuva in himself, he raises up the whole world and all of his talshalos. And he brings what says by Adam Rishon, which is before the Chet. There was no sin yet. The world was Elam Eloi Nivra, and yet there was a need for correction. Of the Ulashama translates the Rebbe. Even the way the world is perfect, before the original sin. And it's not even world, it's Gan Eden. Nevertheless, before lines from the bottom of page Chavshu, when you have this Adam Rishon. The Adam Rishon has work. And if Adam Rishon has work, al derech zeh eitzak alechet vechet mi Yisrael, who's Adam Elyon. Shepei yelehesef al halas elam, as perfect as the world was before the original sin, as perfect as Adam and Chava were before the original sin, there was an inyan of Aliyah and Shuva. Shuva Yisrael, Adad Hashem Elakacha, ki chashalta ba'avinecha, they stumbled because of an ivas v'ikum. Whether it was their fault or was not their fault, whether they did it or was done to them is immaterial. There's a need for Shuva. Not only she needed they should see in the worlds in a revealed way the truth that that you should see that this world's Hashem. That's also a tshuva, but that's a tshuva of Malchus. So they were saying, let me just clarify. He's describing what's the effect of the tshuva. The effect of the tshuva is that you become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the world becomes closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in the world you see the Eibishter. Level 1 of seeing the Eibishter in the world is seeing the Keach HaPel Benefel, the creative power. You say to him is there number 2, Sheyifel Gam Aliyah B'Sfiras HaMalchus, even the words, or the source of the words, which created the world, which are themselves already godly, also need an Aliyah. Because Gam Hi B'Bechinas Yerida, even Malchus of Atzilus, which is called Malchus Ped, the source of the words, of the Mamoras are Yerida, Tavashachas Te'elim Beis, and they also need an Aliyah, they also need a Tshuva. Shagam Beis Be'el Matzilus, B'Bechinas Shesh Makelin Evroim. Malchus is always the source in Evroim. He connects it to the Sid that this is brought into place. Malchus is first Nekeva and then Zachar. The Nekeva of Malchus is higher than the Zachar of Malchus. The Nekeva of Malchus means what we call Zon of Laroyeth. She's the wife of Atzilus. And the Zachar of Malchus is being the husband of Bia. And Malchus therefore needs an Aliyah. I'm 6 lines into page Chafalef now. Not only does the person and the world in Ishtalshus need a tshuva or an aliyah, Elikim, Malchus, also needs a tshuva and aliyah, but even Avaya, which is Ein Seif, or Seif of Kalaman, also needs an aliyah. In as much as it's a creator, in as much as it's a hoya of yiyah ke'echad, it has the shaykhs to the world, and therefore it also needs an aliyah. And the Rebbe concludes, Vizehu, now you have a teretz. We asked a bunch of kashas. How could you say that Naseder Simei Tshuva needs to do Tshuva Eshtetuch and Oy Mekroim, the highest madreges? And the teretz is because there's no limit to madreges of Tshuva. And if you don't appreciate how imperative and necessary and critical the Tshuva is, invoke Barachamecha Rabim Rachem Aleinu. So he concludes, V'zehu Shuva Yisrael Adad Hashem Elakacha. He has to do tshuva. Key. Why does he have to do tshuva? Because there's an yin from Aveda. But not an Aveda necessarily a Merida, but Koshalta Ba'avinecha. Shemesa Yiridas Nishma, said the Neshama fell. Which is the Yerid of Seder Ishtalshlus, the Yerid of Sfiras HaMalchus, the Yerid of Shem Havayeh. Therefore, you have to have Yishu Yisrael Adad Hashem Elakacha. Sha'adam Yaleh Atzmei has to raise himself and his world, and then Yaleh Gam Seder Ishtalshlus, and then Sfiras HaMalchus, and then Shem Havayeh. The Rebbe makes sort of a link. The person, the world, the worlds, Malchus, which is Elikim, and Zah, which is Havaya. And all of the tshuvas happen, like it says in the Novi, that all of the worlds are connected. What happens in one world affects the world above itself, affects the worlds below itself. So the Yid has Bechira, he exercises tshuva, and if need be, he is able to inspire the tshuva only because Hashem helps him to raise himself and to raise his world and to raise the worlds and to raise Malchus and to raise Eitzaf. Now the next paragraph we already read. We're on page Chaf Aleph, middle paragraph. This is the V'rachamecha Rabbi Merachem Aleinu. We already read it. And of course the point is that the Rebbe is arguing in this Tishrei, Tafshel Lamed Ches, that all Yidden are in the highest Madregas. And you wonder why Beklal you have to have a Nina Tshuva. And the teretz is because there's legal madregas in tshuva. Moreover, no matter how high a level a person is on, the need for tshuva is critical. It's very serious. And if we can't be me'ated it in ourselves, we beg the Eibush to Berachamecha Rab Menachem Aleinu. Bottom of page Chaf Aleph. Now goes the new point. This new point, in other words, you have one page left more or less, right? If you have the text, I'm holding here. The mimer finishes here. So we have one complete Omid left. You have to understand, I teach these Maimorim. And of course, if I teach them, I prepare them. But I don't necessarily look up the sources. This is L'chayda based on the Tzemach Tzedek. L'chayda. I didn't look up the Tzemach Tzedek. But in this next page, the Rebbe is going to say very, very powerful things. I suppose on some level you would say that, again, I don't know, but perhaps this is the Rebbe's Chiddush. I didn't look in the Maimer of the Tzemach Tzedek, so I do not know whether the Tzemach Tzedek already says it and the Rebbe is simply repeating it, or enhancing it, or elaborating upon it, or this Mamish Rebbe Savar. To me, it seems like this is the Rebbe's new word, because it's a crazy word. It's an absolutely moedendik word. So I want to sort of impress upon you that we're about to learn. It's going to sound benign. Okay. Yeah, my modem going on. You pile it on. But every shtikula is saying something else. What the Rebbe is going to say in the next couple of paragraphs, I think is extraordinary. Okay? I'll tell you the point. Okay? It says in Chumash that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, you cannot see godliness and live. And then later it says that you will see godliness, but you'll only see the acheraim, the back, the rear. So of course the understanding is you can see my rear, you can't see my face. Now when you're talking about the Eibishter and Moshe Rabbeinu and Hareini Noas Kevedecha and the Isas Achayra Upanai Loyero, you're obviously talking Ruchnius and Ruchnius on very high madregas. Whatever Acharaya means, whatever Punim means, they're both very high levels. When I teach this, I go with the basics, which says in Tanya, Acharaya means Seichel and Punim means Alakus. But here it would seem like Acharaya means Gili Alakus, and Punim would mean Etzem of Alakus. And if it Isas Achayra means you can see Alakus, which is revealed, Beruach HaKodesh, Benavua, Bakayitze Bezeh, Chacham of Novel we had recently in Igeres HaKodesh in Tanya, in Yutes. Ufone Layero means Etzem of Alakus. So the Rebbe is going to come along in this Pedic, hey, and say a Chiddush. That when it says in the Torah, you cannot see the face of God and live. And then it says a few psukim after, that Hashem says you can see the Acharayim, but you cannot see the Ponim. And that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to be Zechet to see Acharayim. The truth is, there is a concept of a person seeing Ponim. A Yid can see Ponim as well. A Yid can see Ponim. Moshe Rabbeinu was told you can't see Ponim. The Lubavitcher Rebbe is going to say a Yid can see Ponim. Now, The simple hesbed is kileid on the adam v'choy. If a person sees Elokus and it causes kaleisa nefesh and the neshama leaves the guf, you could say that you'll be able to see pane, but that's not what the Rebbe is going to say. The Rebbe is going to say you're going to remain in neshama b'guf, you're going to be very, very much alive, and nevertheless you're going to see the pnimius of Elokus. Frega kashe. The Chumash says, Teidish B'Ksav says, Lo Yeron Adam B'Choy, Yisas HaChoyra Yafoni Lo Yero, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the Maimah of Shabbos Shuva, Tov Lamed Ches says, no. It says in the Torah, you can't see Punim. I'm telling you, you could. What's going to be the Rebbe's Hesbed? The Rebbe's Hesbed is going to be this. You cannot see Punim B'derech Shuv. You could see Punim B'derech Ratzah. You cannot see Punim if the idea is that the Punim is coming to you. What comes oir bekeli into the person's vessels internally is limited to acharayim and not panim. But in terms of aliyah, that a yid could raise himself, he could raise himself till panim. And again, this is such a crazy chiddush. And it may be that this isn't 50 Maimorim that I just never learned. But for me, this is incredibly novel. And again, I want to say the word from the beginning. Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest prophet ever, right? And according to the Rambam, and there's 2 days in the Gemara, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu is the greater of even the Mashiach. And Moshe Rabbeinu was told, the limit of a person, even Moshe Rabbeinu, is you can see the Acharayim of Elokus, you can't see the Panim. Says the Rebbe, you could see Panim. But you can't see Panim in Derech Shoy, Derech Slapshus, Eid and Keli, you can only see it with Derech Ratzah. That's what's going to happen in the Maimon. How does it come into the Maimed? It comes in the Maimed the following way. We're learning the pasuk Shuva Yisrael ad Adeshem Elakecha Ki Chashalta Ba'avinecha, that a yid has the shayches Ivas V'ikum on the highest madreges. How high a madrege, how edel, how fine, how theoretical is his Ivas V'ikum, that he has no rachmanas on himself, has to be me'ered Hamerachem Rachem No Aleinu. Brachamecha Rab Rachem Aleinu. But with the help of the Eibishter's Rachmim, he does Shuva Yisrael, ad Havaya Elokecha. He raises himself up, he raises his world up, he raises the worlds up, he raises Malchus up, he raises Ein Sof. So the Aved is very edel. And with the help of the Rachamim Rabbim, which is the Eibishter, is Mo'eder, the Yid is decided to do Shuva with a Min HaMeitzar on these highest and most theoretical levels. What does it say next? Chui Machem Dvorim. And the Rebbe is going to say, Chui Machem Dvorim V'Shuvu El Havaya, this is Pnimius. And he's going to teach Pnimius the way I told you, that it goes on the Ponei Layero of Moshe Rabbeinu. This is the Chui Machem Dvorim V'Shuvu. Yid reaches the Pnimius of Ein Sof, the Madrege which Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, Ki Layer on Yadam B'Chay. And again, the Hasbara is going to be that you can't see it b'derech Shei, b'derech Giloy, Eir B'Keli, but you can see it b'derech Ratz, b'derech Eskalus. Let's read it inside. Bottom of page Chafal. I hope that was clear. I repeated it twice at least. And again, it's one of the things that you do as a teacher is you want to make the students notice. If you want the students to notice those parts of the Maimed that are very, very extreme, you have to press on the nerve to say, you hear the word. It's a big, big chiddush. So that's why I sort of spent the last 5, 6, 7 minutes, whatever it is, using oisius of hispoilus, using words that are exaggerated, because I want you to know that we're about to learn is not Pashut. It can read Pashut. You can read it and not see it. But this is my job, right? That you should see it. And of course, it would be nice if this wasn't just a limud and a haskalah, but it wasn't even avoided by Poel Mamish. Because of continues the Rebbe, it says in the pasuk Chui Machem Dvorim V'Shuvu Avai. There's another Avai. You take words, and of course, in most Maimori Chasidus, Dvorim goes on limud atera, and you return to Havaya. So there's the Shuva ad Havaya Lekecha before, and then there's the Shuvu El Havaya. V'inyin bazeh the pshat is the Shuvu El Havaya Koil HaShav L'Bechines HaPnimius. The second Havaya goes on the Pnimius. And we don't mean the Pnimius, that you should be a little bit higher, a little bit Eidah, a little bit more honest. We mean the Pnimius that Moshe Rabbeinu was denied. The Afal Pisha Nemer, even by Moshe Rabbeinu it's written, but he says, that the face of God you cannot see and live. Mikol Mokem says the Rebbe is saying that what says in Chumash, there's another detail. But Rosh Hashanah, said, Estimate Shuva Yeh, Maki Purim, which all begin B'Chidesh Elo, Inyan Havoid, who I'm turning to page Chav Beis now, is Bak Shufana, a person looks to the face of God. Teaches the Rebbe levakesh ve'lavi lebechinas apnimius, to search for and to find the pnimius. And of course he says Hochem pnimis of Shem Elokim, and then the pnimis of Shem Havaya, until the pnimis vat Saint of, right? It says in Chassidus, the Rebbe has a mock in Likutei Torah, Shemashikosu v'poni leiro. So the Alter Rebbe already said it, yeah? That even though it says in Chumash that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, you cannot see my face, it turns bringing down. But in terms of raising up, there's also a possibility. I want to look into Likutei Torah. I can't do it now, but I'll look later. How much of this is the Alter Rebbe's and how much of this is the Rebbe's? So, El Havaya means that a Yid could reach the Madrega upon him, which Moshe Rabbeinu was denied. But B'derech Aliyah, B'derech Shuva, not B'derech Hamshach. Or Beprati says that the Rebbe explains that Hine, the Tkiyah Shevet, B'derech Hamshach, as Apnimis, Tkiyah Shevet, also even Apnimis. Like it says in Kabbalah, the Tkiyahs have to be Achadim, B'nei Tekeh, when you blow Shev, your face has to turn red. And the Rebbe explains your face turning red means that the blood which was hidden inside the body comes to the surface. And Adimas, 4 lines, the Dibas upon him in his Galas Apnimius, the face turning red, is revealing the Pnimius, which is Ikari and Tkiyah Shev. And by the way, in Tafshin and Beis, the Rebbe blew Shofar very easy. I remember the Tkiyahs, they were short and easy. The Rebbe stood in not his regular place. Instead of standing to Rabbi Tenenbaum, who was the Makri's left, he stood to Rabbi Tenenbaum, the Makri's right. The Shofar, the Tkiyahs went easy. But in the Fabrenga, the Matzah Rosh Hashanah, he mentioned this Maimon Chazal, Adim Pnei Tekeh. Adim means you bring out your Pnimius. And when you bring out your Pnimius, you reach the Pnimius of Elokus. And it connects it also to Yom Kippur. Now by Yom Kippur it also says Lifnei Hashem Titaru, and Lifnei Hashem, it says in Chassidus, means higher than Shem Havaya, which is also Pnei Hashem. And the Rebbe says, just like by Tkiyas, there is Yadim Pnei Tekeh, which is revealing the Pnimius of the person. On Yom Kippur, there's Lifnei Havaya, higher than Shem Havaya, which is the Pnimius of Shem Havaya, until you're higher than Shem Havaya, Lifnei Havaya and Lamaylam Havaya. The Pnimius of Havaya and higher than Havaya. In other words, Shemagim Lebchina Chamishas. A Yid is able to reach, to touch, and to reveal, but only B'derech Allah and B'derech Hamshacha, the 5th level, which we call Yechida, which is Lamayla Midala Deisi Shem Havaya. And the Rebbe says there's 4 worlds, there's 4 letters to Hashem's name, and there's 4 levels of the neshama. They all represent Hishtalshalos. And then there's the 5th level. And the 5th level is higher than Keches Nimim, it's higher than Keches Makifim, and it's connected to Yom Kippur, which is a day, which is Chayev Bechomesh Tfilas, including Tfilas Ne'ilah, which is the 5th level. Okay? The other 4 Tfilas you have always, then the 5th Tfilas is from Yechida. So the Rebbe says, Bak Shofana is Yechida. That even though in Chumash it's written, Upane Le'yero, which means you can't reveal Yechida Bepnimius, but B'derech Allah, Chui Mochem Devarim V'shuvu El Havaya, Yid can reach the Madrega Yechida. Now, to throw kerosene on the fire, remember that in the Maimon Ve'atat Tetzaveh, the Rebbe sort of told us there's 2 Madregas in Yechida. The law of Madrega in Yechida is Etzam HaNeshama Kfishu Mugderes Begeder Apshitas, which is consistent with this. The higher Madrega Etzam HaNeshama Kfishu Mesheshes B'Ha'atzmos, that it becomes Chadam Kechas HaGiluyim. That Maimon seems to be saying that even the idea that the only way to see Ponim is B'derech Allah, not B'derech Hamshacha, could also be B'derech Hamshacha. But this is just Parperois. The Rebbe goes now practical. But again, that says there's in the Sinah Stockam and Amuch, you have to give tzedakah. Because tzedakah is connected to tshuva. And Kiv, and Shabbat says you made tshuva, Yafa B'Yesa, the Rambam writes. The Rebbe says in the Maimon Loshen that there are just 3 zmanim for tshuva. A whole year, Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and Yom Kippurim. So the Aseres Yemei Tshuva is a zman Yafa for tshuva. So the tzedakah should be min Amuvchar, and the Shia should be a Choymish, 20%, because the Choymish is connected to the Madrega HaChamishas. And then it concludes. So the Rebbe's point here is that Posh should get Masad Tzedakah. When a person gives Tzedakah Mamara, Masad Gula, we hasten the Gula Shtebe Fidach Hashem should happen quickly. Like it says in the Gemara Gedel Tzedakah, Shemakinav Gula Tzedakah brings the Gula close. And of course, in Tanya Pedek Lamed Zayin, the Alter Rebbe explains it Poshet in Haskalah. It's not some kind of a segula that Tzedakah brings Mashiach, but that Tzedakah is Mavared more Birurim than anything else, and every Birur is a Yom Gula. When you Mavared a spark, you're redeeming it. So Gedei Tzedakah Shemakinav Zagiyula, through Maisad Tzedakah, you elevate, you refine, you clarify more sparks, and you bring the world closer to the end of Birurim. which is also the idea, which is first of all, hachel magula pratis. First, the person individual giyul, and then hagula klalis, which is the b'china chamishis, like it says in Chassidus, kol neshamas da'at, all souls today are only from Nanach, and when Mashiach comes, there's going to be souls in the madrega of Yechida. Mashiach came to himself is the neshama, the madrega of Yechida, and he's going to reveal in the world neshamas of Yechida as well. Yavav v'yigalenu v'yalechinu kam yisatzenu. And here it says Bakar of Mamish, but the Rebbe's Lashon, which is closer to us, is take off a Biyad Mamish. Okay, that was a good shir, I think. So tomorrow is Shabbos. Sunday is Erev Yom Kippur. I doubt there'll be a shir Sunday, but maybe, if not Sunday, Tuesday, I'm going to do the Maimed of Hazinu. Kenesha, Yor Kinu, Al Gezol of Yirakiv. Al Guten Shabbos. Und Gmach Simatevas, Lachentik Yom Kippur, Dienen, Davenen, Ufton. Dann eine gute